We are unique. We are one.
Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to this International Day of Peace, the 21st of September, right around the world. It's wonderful to be here with you, and we're excited to be bringing you one of our major events this morning, this featured event, Paths to Inner and Outer Peace, with Jonathan Granoff and Gwendolyn Zoharah Simmons. Jonathan, Gwendolyn, welcome to Peace Week.
Thank you.
It's an honor to be with you, Ben. It's great work that Unity Earth and Unify and John Raymer's networks and just all the people that are trying to weave us together in one web of unity.
Thank you, brother. It's a very exciting time, and we're really excited to have you and Gwendolyn join us today for this rich conversation. Let me tell you a little bit about our speakers. I'm going to start with you, Gwendolyn Zoharah Simmons. Ph.D. is Professor Emerita in Religious and African American Studies and affiliated faculty in Women's Studies at the University of Florida. She obtained her BA from Antioch University in Human Services, her MA in Religious Studies, and her Ph.D. in Islamic Studies from Temple University in Philadelphia. Zoharah's got such an extraordinary career with so many different high points and amazing chapters, going all the way back to being active in the civil rights movement during a freshman year at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia in 1962. What a history, what an amazing journey that you've been on. And through that, being part of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and going all the way through to working in that Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in the New York office. Throughout so many years. Beyond that, just an incredible amount of different posts and positions throughout your career, right across the United States, and really working full-time in the movement. She was field director for the project Women Power, and later with the American Friends Service Committee, where she's been an instrumental creator. Let me also say that Zoharah has conducted research as a Fulbright scholar in Jordan, Egypt, Palestine, and Syria on the Sharia impact on women contemporarily and the women's movement in those countries to change these laws. Simmons is a prolific public speaker on college and university campuses, as well as in community forums. She's featured in several films on the civil rights movement and on women and Islam. Additionally, she has written numerous articles and essays on the civil rights movement and on women in Islam. So extraordinary. We're very honored to have you with us, Zoharah, here today, this morning in Peace Week.
The honor is mine. Thank you.
What an extraordinary career. Now, Jonathan Granoff, of course, has a similarly long and extensive bio, but here are some of the highlights. Jonathan Granoff is president of the Global Security Institute. He's a permanent observer to the United Nations of the International Anti-Corruption Academy. He's representative to the United Nations, the World Summit of Nobel Peace Prize laureates. He's a fellow of the World Academy of Arts and Science, and since his youth has been a student of the Sufi saint Bawa Muhyiddin, and he is honored to be his namesake, having been given the name by the saint himself, to be given the name Ahmed Muhyiddin. So brother Ahmed, brother Jonathan, man with many names, thank you so much for being with us and for gracing us all on this special day, this blessed day, this International Day of Peace. Jonathan Granoff.
Yeah, every day, of course, is a propitious day to see the sunrise and remember what brings us here. But you know, you can't see the beauty of the sunrise if your heart's disturbed, if you you have jealousy, anger, anxiety, selfishness, egocentricity, you don't see the majesty of the sunrise. You just don't see it. But when the heart is free, when there's inner peace, when there's love in the heart, then every sunrise, every day is a miraculous event. And every seed turning into a tree is a miracle. And every breath that we take is a breath of grace and gift. So I want to begin our session with a true spiritual sister who has, for me, over many, many decades, been an example of steadfastness, diligence, commitment, wisdom, and goodness. But I want to begin for all of us this day of peace, Shanti, Salam. And peace comes from the qualities that require peace. There's no justice without peace, and there's no peace without justice. There's no love without peace, and there's no peace without love. All of these divine qualities that live to give us life from the emanation of light from the soul bring us together. So may that love that's born of that unity, the love that comes from being one family, the love that comes from a heart of gratitude, the love that has no limit, that gives life to all of us, that brought being into space and time, the love that will never break or fail because it doesn't belong to us, it belongs to the Creator, and the Creator blesses us with it, but we don't own it, it owns us. May that love that compels and that we came into this world with, and we looked into our mother's eyes and fell in love, may that love guide our hearts and give us the wisdom to bring the peace that we know lives in our hearts into this very troubled world. But let us always remember, there is unity, whether we see it or not, it is reality. There is grace, whether we experience it or not, it is part of reality. And there is infinite love, whether we see it or not. So may we have the hearts that can see it and know it and be it. So now I want to go right to my sister, and I want to start early in her life because something called her to an extraordinary endeavor of courage. I mean, unbelievable courage, commitment, and clarity that has helped free so many people. It took us out of Jim Crow and American apartheid into a world in which it's not extraordinary that we had a president, a man of color, and we have a vice president whose heritage is from South Asia, a woman. We wouldn't have this but for what happened in the 1960s in the South in America, when there were people who stood up and said, enough is enough, enough is enough, enough is enough. And they put their lives on the line. So Zoharah, share with us a little bit about your journey when you're still a teenager. What brought you to the streets? What guided you, and what did you experience so that we can share in that? And don't hold anything back, please.
Well, thank you so much, my brother Ahmed, and thank you to all who have organized this gathering. And thank you so much for your opening words about the unity that exists, whether we are aware of it or not. I was raised in the apartheid era in the Jim Crow South. And I was brought up in a very devout Christian home. We began the day with prayer. We ended it with prayer. We did Bible readings. We were in church many times during the week, etc. And in my home, in my church, and in my school, we were taught God is love. And that we, all of us, were children of God, and that there was no difference. And so, of course, I was hearing this from people who clearly believed it, but what I was living was a very different story. And so trying to bring those two things together, and of course, as I became a teenager and witnessing some of the things that were happening, like the Montgomery bus boycott in 1957 and the integration of some of the schools, and it just became clear to me in my heart. I mean, someone once wrote that I answered the call. And of course, I was not clear until much later when I met our dearly beloved Sheikh Bawa Mahayuddin, that indeed it was an internal call that said, just as you said, Ahmed, enough, enough. This must end. And with God's help and guidance, we will end it. And so that was the sustaining thing for me, and I believe all of my comrades and colleagues that put our bodies on the line, as we used to say, to wake our country up and to wake our fellow Southerners up, our white Southern brothers and sisters, that this was not what God intended, the way we were living, and that we had to change it. And we were committed to that change. And I am so clear that God was guiding me every step of the way through so many violent encounters where I thought life was getting ready to end. But it was clear that God was in the plan, and I was leaning on God's everlasting arms, even though I didn't know it.
You're 19 years old. You're leading a group of children. They're children.
Yeah.
And there's officers of the state with weapons before you. You're 19. And you've been taught that the path of life is the unconditional, nonviolent love of Jesus. There's a leader, Martin Luther King, but there were other voices, not just his. There were other men and women who had picked up the microphone, who had put their lives on the line. And you have this moment. I've heard you tell this once. I've had similar moments with guns in front of me too. It's that moment when you just are all in. You're not just putting your voice on the line, you're putting your body on the line, and you're relying not on your intelligence, not on the state's protection, which is very easy for a white person like myself to take for granted, but you're relying on some greater power. Take us to that moment of decision that you had, please. Share that with our brothers and sisters.
Yes, this was in Laurel, Mississippi, where I had been assigned to be the project director during Mississippi Freedom Summer in 1964. And I was there for 2 years. And a number of our members of our project had been arrested. And so I had called for a march to the jail in support of our brothers and sisters who were locked up. And the only people who showed up for the march were children. They were high school children. And I thought, oh my God, well, we're going to go anyway. And so we were approaching the jail, and the sheriff was there, and he told us to turn back. And we were singing freedom songs, as we always did on these marches. And one of our main freedom songs, was that we were not going to let anybody turn us around. So we kept singing. Well, he pulled his gun from his holster and pointed it directly at me and said, "Girl, I told you to turn around." And for a second, I paused, and then I whispered a prayer, and I kept walking, and the young people kept walking behind me, and he actually started laughing. And he said, "Girl, you're a damn fool." And he put his gun back in his holster, and we marched on to the jail and completed our demonstration. Now, I mean, you're talking about I know I was calling on God, but I had no idea if God was hearing me. So it was like, oh, wow. And that was the way it took place. I mean, it was mind-boggling to me also. It was like, oh, God, thank you.
That's called being all in.
Yes.
And that's called love in action. Love in action. You know, Jane Goodall often says that the journey of our life is to go from the head to the heart. But I've had discussions with her, and I said that this isn't complete. There's another part of it. And she knew exactly where I was going. Because if you just take the love that God gives us, that opens the organ of perception called the heart. It's not just an emotional center that's centered on me. It's an open space in which real wisdom and knowledge and courage can come. But if you get that and you don't act on it, if you don't act on that love, it becomes mere sentiment. And your spiritual awakening will kind of devolve into a warm bath and some candles and a massage. Nothing wrong with that, but
Yes.
it's not going to get you to fly, and it's not going to get you to soar. But if you let that love guide the hand, go from the head to the heart to the hand, then the miracle changes. Then the miracle changes your world. We're not in charge of this world. We're put in this world to realize what put us into this world.
Exactly.
And when we have that pure intention and we bring it into action, things happen that you can't possibly ever imagine. And then the salty tears of despair, disappointment, betrayal, and the intrinsic suffering of birth, old age, sickness, and death, and the salt of loss and betrayal and disappointment turns into the sugar and sweetness of opportunities to amplify that love and to serve. It turns into an intelligence that's guided by light and is imbued with the qualities of splendor and wonder and expectation and faith that's not based on ignorance, but faith that's based on experience.
Yes.
And then opportunities to serve that. Well, Rumi said, one of Rumi's prayers is something along the lines, "Oh God, what you told the rose to open, tell my heart to open." You know, this happened at a very young age for you. And I know that one of the parts of your journey was that you're one of the leaders of the American Friends Service Committee. Now, I have a deep love for the Quaker philosophy and the American Friends Service Committee. And it came to me, I did a documentary on the creation of America. I won some film festival awards for that. And in order to do that, I studied deeply what the culture of Philadelphia was in the 1760s and 1770s. And the Quaker community was very powerful there, very powerful. And it deeply informed Benjamin Franklin, who was sort of the wise man who infused much of the principles of democracy and freedom in our conflicted Constitution that also affirmed the legitimacy of slavery. But it has a seed of tremendous vision and virtue in it, largely because of the Quakers. And after your journey, putting it on the line with the civil rights movement and getting your college diplomas and everything, I know that you had a journey in the Quaker community. And, it's just so resonant with what you did as a young woman. And then as a professional, you were instrumental with the international Quaker movement. So I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about that part of your journey.
Oh, certainly. It's very interesting how I became involved with the Quakers and the American Friends Service Committee. When I was offered a job in a project that they had, well, it was really before I was offered the job, because I was not sure that I wanted to apply for this position. I already had a job there in Philadelphia, and it was working with young people. And I was enjoying being sort of a mentor and a trainer, parent trainer, when I was made aware of this. And so I went to Bawa, our dearly beloved spiritual father, and I asked him about this because I said, I like where I am. It's a permanent job. This job at the American Friends Service Committee is guaranteed for 6 months. And, I don't know about it. And so Bawa looked, as he often did. We knew that he was studying deeply what the outcomes and all would be. And he said, I know the Quakers. I know them very well. And he said, yes, you should take this job with the Quakers. You will love them and they will love you. And of course, I knew from experience that Bawa's advice would be whatever he advised was what I should do. So what had been advertised as a 6-month job turned into 23 years of me working with them. At that session with Bawa, he said, they will send you around the world a few times to do good work. And I was like, around the world? Are you kidding? I mean, I'd never been outside of the United States. So it was like, I found that pretty shocking, but I believed him if he said it, So indeed, that is exactly what happened. I'll just mention being sent with a delegation to Vietnam, since we're talking about peace. After the end of the U.S.'s war on Vietnam, and traveling by van, by boat, however you could, because it was right after the war ended, and seeing the destruction from Hanoi to Saigon, and then unexpectedly being given the chance to go to Cambodia right after the Vietnamese army had been able to push Pol Pot out of the major city there in Cambodia, and seeing that destruction, while I always saw myself as nonviolent, but seeing the destruction and hearing from the victims of war, just completely solidified my commitment to work for peace for the rest of my life.
So you mentioned, I want to tell a story of my experience with Vietnamese diplomats. I was at a conference in the Middle East with them, and we were at a retreat. This was a conference that had players from all the countries in the Middle East, except Israel. But there were people there who would want to build bridges with Israel for sure, and there were people that didn't. But there was a delegation with Vietnamese diplomats, and I decided to have breakfast with them, and I said, I want to offer an apology for what my country did. I worked really hard to stop that war. I had guns put to my head by agents of the state. I put it on the line just to work to stop that. But my country did it anyway, and we didn't succeed. And and the head of the delegation said, well, don't apologize. We're so over that. And I felt that. It really blew my mind. They didn't have a victim's mentality. And I said, I've really experienced that people from Vietnam, and you don't have that victim's attitude. You're not looking for reparations or vengeance or anything. You're just moving forward. What's that about? And she smiled and said, well, you have to understand we're Buddhists. And in Buddhism, the first duty you have is to be happy. And you can't be happy if you carry the past and live in anticipation of the future. So we don't live in the past. We live now. And I said, I can really feel that. It's very powerful. But I thought you were communists. And she said, oh, no, that's just on the surface. And, and I was friends with there was a great Buddhist monk, Mahagosananda. And Mahagosananda was so powerful. He was this little guy. And he was so powerful that he went into the killing fields and stood in front of the Khmer Rouge, looked them in the eye with his incredible presence and said, take me first. And he saved hundreds of thousands of lives, went through Cambodia. And we were at a conference at Stanford University with some presidents, with the leaders of the university. And I asked him, do you have any anger for what the Khmer Rouge did? They killed a seventh of the population of Cambodia in the most horrific ways over ideology. And he said to me, good in the beginning, good in the middle, good in the end. And I said, that's that's a riddle. It's too cryptic. Just tell it to me straight. He said, every one of us has a camera that records every intention that we have and every deed that we do. And whatever we do that causes benefit or injury to others, we have to experience. We have to experience what we've done. That's the law. And I want to experience loving kindness and compassion. That's all I want to experience. So I want my camera to record that. And those soldiers, they have their cameras. He never said the word God, but I have to say it was one of the strongest affirmations of faith that I have ever heard. He didn't say, this is God's law. He just said, this is the way it is. This is the way it is. Zoharah, you mentioned Bawa. He was a small man, very, 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 very old, found in the jungles of Sri Lanka. And you were instrumental in bringing him to the Western world. You were in Philadelphia, and somehow you helped him get here with a small group of people. And and obviously, when he emphasized that it would be good for you to be one of the leaders of the Quaker, a Sufi and a quaking Sufi. You said, yeah, that makes sense. I'll do it. You had that faith. Just tell about what kind of insight into things he had, and what you experienced with him that led you to have that kind of confidence.
Well, interestingly, and I know from talking to many of our brothers and sisters who are members of what is the Bawa Mahayadeen Fellowship, we were drawn to look for a teacher. We were being called, I believe. And for me, that began when I was 10 years old, thinking that I'm not getting the full story here. I mean, we're in the church, we're, your parents who love you, they're giving you a narrative about who we are and why we're here. But for me, it wasn't enough. In fact, I went to, the minister of my church. He was held a Ph.D. in theology. And I kept saying, tell me the real reason that we're here. What is going on here? And, he couldn't answer me. So anyway, that had been a search of mine for many years. And, in the late 60s and early 70s, there were many of us searching for a guru, as we said. And, it's not happened. I always have to remind myself that nothing was just happenstance, that it was all planned, though I knew nothing about the plan. But I learned about Bawa from one of his students who was studying at the University of Pennsylvania, working on a doctorate in anthropology. And he had studied with Bawa in Sri Lanka. and he wanted to bring Bawa to the United States. And so he reached out to a person who at that time was my yoga teacher, and she had him to come to the yoga class to talk about his teacher. And he, of course, was saying, I'm not a citizen. I need citizens to sign on to this invitation and the visa documents and all of that. And he brought pictures of Bawa and some of Bawa's teachings that we read. Well, immediately in my heart, I made a connection through the photo and through the words on the page. And I volunteered to help bring this teacher, at least make the applications for this teacher to come, and was, so blessed to be a part of the 13 persons who met him at the airport when he first arrived. And, often people think that you must be nuts when you say that the first thing I saw was light coming from him. It was so powerful that it actually frightened me as he walked into the waiting room at the Philadelphia airport. And then, of course, I saw, after sort of the light dissipated, I saw the human form, and I was already in love with that form, and it was cemented on first sight. And so
how did he indicate that he was with you before he ever saw you? You were, as I recall, you were married, and your husband was incarcerated because he was a conscientious objector and refused to fight, refused to be violent, refused to hate, and was in jail. And I know there was a relationship, because that I know your former husband is a man of tremendous virtue and courage, guided by spirit, putting himself in, allowing himself to go to jail over it, and I know that was guided. So how did you know that there was a relationship to your teacher in that way, to our teacher in that way?
Well, and I just want to rush ahead to say yes, as to meeting Bawa and the first things he said to me. But let me just go back to say that in August, I had gone with another person who became a disciple and a member of our Bawa Mahayadeen family. We had gone to New York to talk to a holy woman that I had been told to go see. This was in August of 71. And my question to her was, are you my teacher? I've been directed to you. And she said, oh no, I'm not your teacher. She said, but your teacher is coming, and there may be no others like him left. That's the word she used. And he's coming for you and all of his children here in America. And I mean, I was like, coming from where? What are you talking about? She said, oh, he is so beautiful, and he will answer all the questions you have had all of your life. So now this was 2 months before Bawa came to the United States. I just want to mention that. So this holy woman saw him already. But then when we left the airport and went to the home where Bawa would be staying, and he began talking to us all. And he said to me, he said, I have been watching you for many, many years. He said, and I have been watching you of late in your little car driving up the mountain. Now, Michael was in the Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. And you did have to go up a mountain to get to Lewisburg. He said, and I've been watching, and he says, and I know your husband, and I know why he's there. He has no business being there, and I'm going to get him out. So, I mean, this is a man that just got off a plane from Sri Lanka. And at the moment, I wasn't thinking about what the woman had told me. So I'm like, who is this person? Oh my God, So that was one of many things he told me about his involvement in my life over many decades.
I asked him, how do you know these things? How do you know about everyone that you meet? I asked him, and he said he said that if you drop a stone into a pond, the circles keep resonating outward. And he said, like that, if you drop your heart into the love and compassion of God, then you learn from the expanding resonance, and that's in everybody's life. So I'm going to just read how he describes that love that gives us the capacity to know other lives as part of our own. And Zoharah and I met a human being who did this. And he was very emphatic in saying that this capacity of achieving this kind of love is a birthright of every human being. Mm-hmm. It was very, very emphatic about that. Yes. And that, he was our teacher, but his emphasis was the universality of this. And he said that in his time here, he was like the fruit behind the leaves. He was not trying to do a movement. He just had some people that he had a duty to do. And we have a duty to testify that we met someone who did this. Yes. And remind everybody that what I'm going to read to you is something that he showed is real. And he said this is a level that all of us have the potential to reach. So he said, this is from a book on God's love. So he said, and I was there for this talk when he gave this, and it resonated. And just what he said about it. If you will open your heart, your actions, your wisdom, and your conduct, and look within, you'll see that every face is your face. Every nerve of every person, each drop of their blood is your blood. Every sickness and suffering is yours. All hunger is your hunger. All poverty is your poverty. All sorrow is your sorrow. All lives are your life. You will experience this in your nerves, in your own body, and in what you see. When that state develops inside you, that is God's love. That is God's true love, because all suffering is his suffering. All sorrow is his. All hunger is his. All poverty is his. All of it is inside him too. This is how God does his duty. Therefore, if you develop that love, you will do your duty in the same way. If that love develops, you will never hurt any other living thing. You will not cause any pain. You will not reject any life. And you will not torture any other life, because if you hurt anyone, it will hurt you. The other side of that willingness to suffer with others, which is called compassion, he called it love, that we saw was this extraordinary capacity for joy. Now, if a wise person said, share the joy of others with yourself, people would only want to share the joy. But the secret of compassion, the secret is that in the liberation of others, you not only experience the freedom from their suffering, you experience the joy. So this man we're talking about had such a vibration of joy and happiness that literally, just to be in the room with him, you felt you were at home, and you felt a level of joy that you feel when you get a newborn baby and you're holding it in your arms, and it's like, oh my God. And that was sort of the state that he invoked, of this tremendous, joyous celebration of life. And this willingness to look, as the Buddha calls it, the first noble truth. The first noble truth in Buddhism is there is affliction, there is suffering, there is old age, sickness, and death. Own it, see it, know it. Intellectually, how could you call that a noble truth? I mean, it just sounds like, what a terrible deal. You're born into this world for suffering? That makes no sense intellectually. But if your heart opens, and as Jesus said, what you do to the least amongst us, you do to me, right? As Gandhi said, if you want to know a good policy, imagine the most disenfranchised person that you've ever seen and think, is this policy a blessing or a burden to them? This is how I lived with this man in Sri Lanka with the poorest of the poor. And he treated the poorest of the poor with the exact same love and intimacy as I saw him treat prime ministers, as part of himself. Now, that Buddha's first noble truth becomes noble in experience, because if you experience that reality that all of us are only here for a short time. Just a little while ago, we were pure little infants, and a little while later, we'll be dust. We'll just be in the ground. It's going to happen. When you really experience that, then all of a sudden you feel this intimacy with other lives. You feel it. You feel there's no one that you'll realize there's no one above you. There's nobody who acquires property and power. They just have the one scene in the play and it's gone. The curtain will close soon. They're not above you, and no one is below you, because that's what that love does. There's nobody. So you want to serve. You want to address that. So I want to share an experience that I had putting this teaching into practice. I was on the A train. It's a perfect metaphor. The A train is this. Remember to take the A train. Duke Ellington's great thing. I'm on the A train. It's the first train. The subway, the main subway in New York. It's a crowded subway, and I'm sitting in the subway. It's kind of sticky and funky, and it's New York. And I started looking at each of the people on the subway and imagining them as being pure little infants. That a little while ago they were like little babies, and soon they'll be gone like me. But I was trying to imagine what they looked like when they were, they just came into the world at 1 year old. And I just saw it in some of the people. I didn't see it in everybody, but I saw it in enough of them that my heart just felt this joy to be together with them on the journey of the subway. But it was really larger than that. We're together in this journey of life. We're together here. And I was just filled with this sort of presence, because my heart was open. I was filled with this presence of being there with them, and that they were going to suffer like me, and they were going to have joy like me. And then all of a sudden, this is New York subway, people started smiling at me. And it was this absolute affirmation of a truth that our teacher said, if you have that inner joy and peace, you will be able to make it come into the world in joy and peace. And lives will respond to that, like that policeman when you were standing in front of him with those children to end apartheid in America. And now the world is in a state in which we're at war with nature. You can have plan A and plan B. There's no plan B. This is International Day of Peace. The first peace we have to make is peace with nature. And we are nature. We are the air we breathe, which is the phytoplankton from the oceans. We are the water. We are nature. We're not like watching nature. We are nature. So to stop the war with nature, we have to stop the war within ourselves. And part of the principle of stopping the war within ourselves is to treat other lives as we want to be treated. And we've got to get our institutions to do that. Now, our institutions of law, states, corporations, were created with rules that we didn't know that we could go to war with nature when we created the multinational corporation. We didn't know it. And the only rule for the corporation's profit. We didn't know that we could destroy the world. When we created the nations, we didn't know that nations have a responsibility to the entire world. We created nations, we didn't have nuclear weapons. We didn't have the ability to end the future. We didn't know it. Now we know it. So now we need to bring that wisdom that comes from the principles of inner peace into our lives and institutions. That's why today is International Day of Peace. Look, without the revelation of the Quakers, the United States Constitution wouldn't have this infusion of wisdom. We wouldn't have, "We hold these truths to be self-evident," written in Philadelphia by Thomas Jefferson to remind us of our equality. We wouldn't have that. It was because there were people who connected with the deep inner peace of the presence of God's love, which is that description of feeling it of all lives. So I want to lay out 3 principles for International Day of Peace. And I would ask you to comment on them, Zoharah, because you are a person for me who has been an example of putting the teaching, the great teaching that Bawa said was in every single wise prophet, wise person ever. So he asked us to, what is that one teaching that you see in all the teachings? Find it. So I often think, in the practices of religions, they say, well, this is the teaching for all. Okay, so it doesn't make any sense to me, because if the teaching for all is you have to drink this particular wine, there's parts of the world where they don't make wine. Aborigines people don't make wine, so they can't. Are the doors to heaven not open to them? And then in Islam it says fast from sunrise to sunset. Well, that doesn't really work very well for indigenous Eskimos and Inuits up by the North Pole. They'd have one fast session and they die because it's 6 months of darkness. So there has to be something else in that message. The golden rule is there in all the traditions. Treat others as you want to be treated. But I propose another one for today, which is love people, use things. Because if you understand that people are connected to the whole and that people are sacred, then you understand we're not just talking about the forms of people, we're talking about their inner being, to respect their dignity. And then the things that we create are states, corporations, ideas. Ideas are things, they have a beginning and an end. Love people, use things. Never love things and use people. People are not a means to fulfill some end of a thing. The purpose of the things is to enhance life, to enhance the beauty of knowing and the beauty of love. And the last but not least was a principle that our teacher Bawa used to say: separate from yourself that which separates you from others. And like on a superficial level, that's like, I'm a black person, I'm a white person, I'm a male, I'm a female. All the identity politics that Martin Luther King was so passionately against. I recently did I'm the senior advisor to the summits of the Nobel Peace Laureates, and we were doing a press conference in Paris, and there were a bunch of very famous laureates, and I was moderating, and there was this elderly black man next to me. I said, I didn't know who he was. Who are you? And he said, I'm Clarence Jones. And I said, I don't know, who's Clarence Jones? He said, I was Martin Luther King's speechwriter. And I was like, I thought God was Martin Luther King's speechwriter, right? And he explained to me that Martin Luther King was very much against identity politics, because his point was, we are one human family. We are one human family, and that is the point. So the idea of overly identification with religion, nation, gender, etc., those are real, but that's not our core. That's not our core. So he said, anger, falsehood, jealousy, pride, vanity, lust. These are things that affirm the illusion of being separate. Love, compassion, patience, justice, tolerance, they liberate us from egocentricity. And they not only bring us together as humans, they bring us together with the soul that makes us human. And we need to be that and then bring it into our institutions. That's International Day of Peace. That's the day the United Nations today has declared is that day. I heard Zelensky yesterday at the UN talk about the need for greater justice. We don't hear enough about the quality of God's justice. The reason that the UN is its weakness is that the whole world doesn't have an equal say in it. It's disproportionate. one country in the P5 can veto everything, and right now we have one that's gone full rogue. And so Zelensky made a call for greater justice, and I boiled it down to this: no one washes a rental car. If you're not participating, you're not going to perfect the institution. So I'm speaking to my brothers and sisters in the community of spiritually awakening people. We have to wash the car. It's not the places we live, the communities we live, the states we live in, they're not rental cars. They're our cars. We're put in this world to be part of this. And the love that we have found within ourselves, we need to bring it into action. We need to go from the head to the heart to the hand. This is our time. This is our responsibility, because there's danger and suffering, and we have to step up. And my sister Zoharah is an example who heard the call as a teenager and has lived a life of nobility in that. And the last thing is, when you get that thing, that message, then you start to develop skills that are commensurate with your proclivities. It might be scholarship, it might be just being a nice neighbor. But Zoharah, you developed the skill of a great scholar. And I wanted to make sure that people know about your writings and the recent book that's come out about your journey, so that people can read it and be inspired by that you are walking the talk. And so let people know about that book, about your story, please.
Well, thank you so much. I know we are over time, but as a student of mine, a former student of mine, worked for 7 years to document my work and that of my former husband, Michael Simmons, in a book called Stayed on Freedom. And it's available in bookshops everywhere. But more important than talking about our lives is talking about the movements that we were engaged in, that were attempting and are still attempting to, first of all, put into practice God's love, God's compassion, God's tolerance, and to bring about peace in the world for all of humankind and for all of our non-human beings. Amen.
Ben Bowler and all the people in Unity Earth Unify, may God continue to expand our hearts so that we become the movement of hearts without borders. All Amen. Praises to the goodness that's blessing and guiding us. Amen.
Amen. Amen. And thank you so much. And this was a very rich exploration of inner peace to outer peace, and bringing in those extraordinary encounters with Boa that you both had. I really enjoyed and loved your stories, Zoharah, and we look forward to hearing more from you. I have so much to ask you. I'd love to know, and I'm sure many other people are the same. So I hope this is just part one of an ongoing dialogue. Thank you for being with us. Blessings and gratitude. Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you so much.